set up at the back. This is, as you appreciate, a complex and emotional issue, so I would ask you please to, because we've got limited time, to restrict yourselves to questions, no long speeches, so please, during the Q&A.
Test. Yep. Good evening, everyone. I would just like to start by making a few comments on the situation that you've seen portrayed so well there on the documentary. And then afterwards, not open up just to questions, but I think we'd particularly like to hear from Americans and so we can get a sense of what American perceptions are. Are American perceptions of what's going on in the West Bank and Gaza beginning to change? Or are they fairly rock solid in support of Israel? And I think that's important for us to know as activists here in Bangkok as to whether there is a beginning of a shift, in particular in American public perception. And 2 points I would like to make just to kick things off is, first of all, to remind us that this is about occupation. 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 And what is the legal situation? Never mind the moral issues, which I think are huge on their own right. Let's just remind ourselves on the legal situation as regards the occupation. And let's start with the West Bank. Those settlements in the West Bank where I thought it was about 500,000. I was just listening to the documentary there and it was saying it's over 600,000 and it's growing by the day. 600,000 Israelis living in the West Bank. That is illegal. It is illegal under international law. Which law? It violates the Geneva Convention. An occupying power is not allowed to move in its own population or anyone else's population into the land it occupies. That land belongs to Palestine, though Israeli settlers should not be there. It's a violation of the Geneva Convention, so it's therefore a war crime. And that's not disputed. I think even in the US it's recognized that that is a violation of international law. Let's look at the West, not the West Bank, let's look at Gaza. We're told that it's not occupied, and if you do look at the situation, it is. But even if it's not occupied, the question is, under the in Gaza, is that we're dealing with collective punishment. What is that collective punishment? The collective punishment, Israel believes that it can blockade Gaza and conduct a siege because it wants to punish the Palestinians in Gaza for the actions of the Hamas militants. But again, that is a violation of international law. You are not allowed to conduct collective punishment on a civil population because of the acts of militants. And that is against the Geneva Convention again. So that is another war crime. So we have war crimes committed in the West Bank and we have war crimes committed in Gaza. There's another crime. And this regards the diaspora and the Palestinian refugees who are denied the right of return. Those people who saw on the documentary who were kicked out in 1948, the reason we're here tonight, the Nakba, to commemorate that catastrophe, have a right to return. That right is espoused in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and also in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. So there we have a crime, a humanitarian crime, a crime against humanity. So there's nothing legal about the Israeli occupation either in the West Bank or in Gaza or as regards the diaspora. The other second point I would like to mention before we look at questions or comments is to do with the actions that Israel takes. We're looking at disproportionate use of force. There's nothing equal about the violence we're seeing being used, and all the focus you saw in that documentary was looking at the violence the Palestinians were using. Let's put that into perspective. And let me quote some statistics from Norman Finkelstein about Operation Protective Edge back in July and August 2014. According to him, I think this is fairly generally recognized. I think there were 2,200 Palestinians killed in Operation Protective Edge. 1,600 were civilians. 500 of those were children. On the Israeli side, there were 12. No civilian fatalities, 12 soldiers. I think 4 of those were killed by enemy fire. So 2,200 in comparison to 8. This was a turkey shoot. And the documentary talks about these missiles raining down on the Israelis. Let's again put that into perspective with these facts that come from Norman Finkelstein, who's regarded as an expert, who's very detailed researcher and scholar. He says, yes, the Hamas fired equivalent with their rockets and mortars 50 tons of high explosive. 50. The Israelis fired with artillery bombardments and airstrikes 20,000 tons of high explosives. The consequence of this for the Palestinians is that they had 19,000 homes destroyed or damaged, made inhospitable as a consequence of those bombardments, and the Israelis had no homes damaged. So a massive discrepancy when we are talking about the violence that is used. And another point he points out that's not reported in any of the media anywhere is that there were 200 mosques damaged in Gaza, and 70 of those were completely destroyed, and there were no synagogues. And can you imagine the outrage that would have been if a synagogue had been damaged, never mind destroyed? So 2 issues there on the occupation itself. It is illegal in all aspects of it. And looking at the security and the violence being used, it is disproportionate and one-sided. So that was just a recap of some of the situation we got there in the occupied territories. And I would like to ask if people have questions, or particularly if you have any comments to make about your own perception, particularly if you are an American. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. You mentioned you wanted comments about what the American perception is from Americans. Well, I'm Palestinian American myself, and actually I've seen it change over the last few years. I remember about 8 years ago, you couldn't say a word. And even when you did, you wouldn't get any sympathy, or you'd get very silent agreement. And I see a lot people more vocal, especially among minority communities. Like they mentioned the Black Lives Matter movement. There's also a lot of Latino Americans who empathize with the movement as well. And partly because, you know, the whole "we didn't cross the border crossed us" situation. So there's a lot of solidarity going around, and I think it's gaining movement. It's gaining a lot of power. But I think at the end of the day, like they said, you have a lot of people with a lot of money stifling it a lot. And but I see a lot of promise, though.
Is this a generational difference? That was the suggestion that we heard on the documentary.
I think it is, actually. Absolutely. I think a lot of people in my generation are very upset and very disenchanted with the way our media presents a lot of things. And the documentary hit it right in the money. There's a lot of independent news organizations that have been popping up, and a lot of them that have evolved to the short form attention span that a lot of people my age have these days, and they present it very concisely and very effectively and very, for lack of a better word, shareably.
That's appearing in the mainstream media, so we can see that dominated by those people with money and the older generation. What about in the social media? Is there a swing towards Palestine on this?
I think both sides of the argument have a social media movement going on, but I do believe that in general, yes.
Okay. What about boycott, disinvestment, and sanctions? How is that going down?
It's still a bit of a taboo. I think it's still being equated with anti-Semitism.
Okay. Thank you.
My name is Haitham. I'm a documentary filmmaker from Egypt. Actually, I have two questions, please. First one is related to the main target of the film. I was covering the last American elections on film.
So can you get closer to the microphone so I can't hear you?
That's fine? Yes.
Yep.
I was covering the last American elections, Romney and Obama. And I have a lot of comments towards the awareness of Americans towards how they are voting for Republican or Democratic. So the first question for myself, what's the importance actually to changing the awareness of the Americans' public opinion towards the Palestinian issue? That's the first thing. The second thing, according to your discussion with the last inquiry related to the mainstream media. And right now, I need to know actually your point of view towards the mainstream media, towards the main issues in the Arab world right now, like ISIS or like Qaeda, or like Egyptian situation, or like the Arabian situation, because right now, for my generation, we know that the whole mainstream media, like Sky News, for example, and BBC, for example, and Al Arabiya and Al Jazeera, we know that their agenda towards how they are making a treatment or making angle for stories. So no credibility anymore. That's now for my generation. So the two questions for you.
Sorry, that first question is how can attitudes to Palestine be changed?
What's the importance actually for changing the awareness of the American public opinions towards what's happening in Palestine?
And the second one is what can we do about mainstream media?
Mainstream media during the main other issues. Yeah, Palestine issue is the main issue.
Yep.
But also Syria issue is a main issue. For example, the whole Arab channels right now are dealing with the Syria issue as a Syria crisis, using the term crisis. In my point of view as a journalist, it's like it's a revolution, or started as a revolution 2 years ago. So how can we stop the mainstream, or how can we change the words? Yes.
Let's see if I can answer that. First one is what can we do about changing the attitudes towards the Palestinians? I think that's that first one.
Yeah.
And I would say that documentary gave us some insight into how the media is manipulated by the Israeli lobby. So understanding that means we bring about an awareness in viewers and the American public about what is actually going on with that. And I think the other second thing is to keep reminding people about the context. I think the mainstream media does not want the context to be highlighted, because as soon as you understand the context, you understand that this is an occupation, then everything seems to make sense. Then you understand why the Palestinians are resisting. And then if we understand as well how much violence is being applied by the Israelis, that again will help significantly with that. So it is about making sure that the image people has is the visual images of the death and destruction that's rained down on the Palestinians, and also again keep pointing out the illegality of the occupation. I think there's a general consensus across the international community that what needs to happen. There is only a couple of states that are blocking it, and that is the US and Israel. But there's a very broad consensus that what we need is a return to the 1967 borders, that we need to do something about the refugees, the right of return, end the settlements, and then the blockade on Gaza. Those four things, it's quite straightforward. So that message needs to keep being hit through time and time again, or questions asked to the mainstream media. Why is Israel not moving in any of those four issues? Borders, refugees, settlements, and the blockade. So that's what we need to keep doing with that. As regards the mainstream media, I think this is a problem for all of our communities, not just the Palestinian community. What are we doing in our own countries as regards elites, the 1% versus the 99%? And one of my arguments personally, outside of the Palestinian issue, is that I don't think we can understand world events such as Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Ukraine, attacks on Iran, without understanding that we have a particular set of establishment in the US as well as the UK, and in Europe. I was only reading today about how the President Hollande and the Socialist Party are going to drive through a new set of laws without even putting it through to the vote. Yeah, these are austerity measures. So we're seeing this across the Western world and beyond, inside our own countries, and never mind the attacks that our establishments in the West conduct on the developing world. So this is a global problem of how do we deal with our elites. And it also comes back to what sort of community do we as global citizens want to see? And I think at the heart of that, until we have the Palestinians freed, then we don't actually have a solution to all these other problems either. I think they're all interlinked. I hope we're going to see some change fairly shortly.
Thank you, sir.
Microphone? We got one here.
I just want to say, you're hoping for change soon. You're hoping for change soon, but basically, Israel has been ignoring all of, breaking all these rules for so many years now. I mean, I can't remember a time when they haven't, you know, they've been told for how many years now to go back to the 1967 borders?
Yep.
So why are they going to change now? What are we doing globally? If the only people that support them are America and the rest of the world see that this is wrong, what is going to force Israel to change?
I think it's the BDS campaign, the boycott.
Are we applying sanctions to Israel?
Not at the moment.
Will America stop selling arms to Israel?
Not immediately.
What's going to make them do that?
Let me answer the question on the arms. I think we also have to understand that Israel is an important attack dog for the West in the Middle East. So
isn't that again propaganda, isn't it? Because we're all fed fear, aren't we? So
no, I'm saying Israel is used to attack Western opponents in the Middle East.
That's because we're all made to fear the Middle East, aren't we?
No, it's for strategic reasons. Yeah, or oil, to make sure the oil flows our way and not somebody else's way. Yeah. So there are strategic reasons for supporting Israel, and those strategic reasons have been there for over 100 years. Yeah.
Isn't that why America likes to have them, though?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. That money going to to the Israelis isn't just a giveaway money. It means that Israel is tied into the US and its security and strategic interests.
Why would they change?
I don't think the establishment wants to yet. Yeah, it wants to. So that is a problem for all of us on that side of it. But going back to, so the elites or the nation states, just like in the apartheid time in South Africa, and the nation states governments didn't want to do any changes on that. It was only when...
But we did apply sanctions to South Africa.
Ultimately, but that was because of the grassroots movement that was bringing pressure to bear on their own governments on that. And I've just pointed out a couple of facts on the boycott, disinvestment and sanctions. And if you go to the BDS website and you see some of the things that have been happening over the last couple of years, there's been some significant changes. I can't remember them all of myself, but one of the things I was fascinated to hear was that 25 to 30% of the Israeli companies based in the West Bank have moved out. 25 to 30% of them have left the West Bank and gone back to Israel because of the pressure they are receiving everywhere on boycott, disinvestment and sanctions. As a consequence of that, and never mind the companies in the West, Viola is one I can think of, Orange, that was a UK telephone company, is now French owned, that has reduced or given up its mobile phone operations in that area. So we are seeing some impact on that, which is why we're now seeing BDS being labeled with the anti-Semitic flag. Yeah, and we're seeing attempts in the US at the state level to ban BDS. I haven't fully understand what the legal situation is, but I know there's about 17 US states have passed anti-BDS laws. Some of the websites I'm reading say those state laws will not pass the federal threshold because of human rights and things on that. But that does give you some sense of the pressure that's being applied by the Zionist lobby to try and intimidate BDS, because it's being effective. Yeah, said 30% of Israeli companies have moved out of the West Bank. Yes.
I'm sorry, I think the young lady was first, and then the guy in the blue shirt. Yeah.
Hello there. My name is Duffy. I think maybe I can shed some perspective as an American student. Also to go off a little bit on what Pablo was saying before. Just to give a quick introduction, I'm actually a Thai-Irish student who graduated and did my studies in the United States. I went to a school in Denver, Colorado, and my particular high school was a very Jewish-oriented community. We were right next door. We were next to like a Jewish religious center, and I was actually the president of a Jewish club for 2 years. However, I am Buddhist, so this is a weird perspective. Anyway, one of the things that I wanted to really go over on is maybe I can give a perspective for all of those who are interested in learning about the perspective of those who are 20 or under 20 or in the university student demographic. So what I would say now when you were talking about social media is that right now I believe that right now, as with what the documentary was going on off as, that right now more people are definitely more going pro-Palestinian as they're being more critical of Israel. And a lot of people are definitely, especially in my own age group, among the people that I know in university right now, are looking at independent news sources and really getting away from mainstream news sources. And I can definitely tell that from my own things on social media. Just wanted to go off on that.
So at the school you were at, it was predominantly Jewish. What was the feelings of the students there?
Well, most of it was definitely pro-Israel. For the past, I will maybe to explain my affiliate with the Jewish club. I had a lot of Jewish friends, and I eventually became co-president of the Jewish club with my friends as well, just because of our relationship with the rabbi who was in charge of it. And basically what we were exposed to as 13 to 17-year-olds was a lot of pro-Israel things. Every week we would get some talks by pro-Israel people, people that went to war in Israel, or I'm sorry, like did their, I don't know what you call this, your war time, your soldier.
Military service?
Yes, thank you. Your military service in Israel, a lot of people that had lived there for a long time, that had faced the hardships, etc. So we were really only, as like American students, we were only exposed to this one side rather than the Palestinian thing, which is one of the reasons why I'm here today, is because I wanted to really learn about this perspective of Palestine, because I was never exposed to it in high school in the United States.
Good, thank you for being here. I hope
you're
you've
welcome.
Moved a little bit in our direction.
Yeah, and like, to be honest, I was never in one particular direction. Being both kind of like a Thai-Irish student, but also not being Jewish, but really only being there because I got free pizza for lunch every week, and because all of my best friends just happened to be Jewish. I really learned about it. I learned a lot about Jewish culture, but was kind of able to look at the whole perspective and the dynamics between both countries from like an outsider perspective, without really affiliating myself to being pro-Israel or pro-Palestine. And on top of that, I knew nothing about Palestine. There was really just kind of a negative, atmosphere towards it, but it was never outrightly said in those group discussions in high school. So I'm happy that I'm able to look and analyze at both of these things and kind of analyze it and then look at it from multiple perspectives before actually coming to a conclusion, which is what I'm very happy about.
Have you made a conclusion yet, or will you need a few days to reflect?
I mean, I think it's like, actually, like, I think my presence here is a little bit more self-explanatory in many ways. Yeah, I mean, good, but we could say bad as well. I don't want to like necessarily take sides. I don't want to say I'm so far removed from such a terrible...
Will you be going back to your high school?
I don't know when I will ever go back to the United States.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But possibly, like, I'm in contact with my rabbi on Facebook. He posts a lot of links about, what was it, those websites, the pro-Israel websites.
APAC, TIP.
These are websites. They like fill up my newsfeed.
Perhaps you can now challenge him a little bit on what's being said.
Yeah, but I'm a little bit intimidated. I've seen what happens.
No, you must not be. I think you have to realize that this is a massive case of injustice, and I don't think you can stand on the sidelines. I think you've got to get involved and say something back to him.
Yeah, for sure I will, and I'll maybe suggest that with his new meetings, especially because I'm actually, I was the one who inducted the new Jewish presidents to be a part of the Jewish Student Union club in high school. That can be like, yo, maybe the next club you should introduce this documentary and have some
Good luck with
people.
that.
Yeah, why not? No, actually, like a lot of the students I know are quite liberal about this, so
thank you
I'll
very
try
much.
my best.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm from the USA, and I kind of have the feeling that in the last 5 years, the support for Palestine has gone from about 1% up to about 8%. So it's not really a lot, but I do see change. And I used to work in radio as a radio DJ and also management. And I know of at least 20